The capital city of Charleston, West Virginia. This is Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis. Inside West Virginia Politics is brought to you by AARP West Virginia, your ally for real possibilities in the Mountain State.
Well, hello everyone, and welcome to another edition of Inside West Virginia Politics. We're coming to you again this week from the beautiful Senate reception room here at the West Virginia State Capitol. Joining us now as our first guest is the Honorable Roger Hanshaw, Speaker of the House of West Virginia, Republican of Clay County. Good to have you on the show, Speaker Hanshaw. First thing I want to do is get a reaction now to the big story of the week. It's not only a political story, but a legal story that a federal grand jury has been convened in Clarksburg to look into the 11 suspicious deaths at the VA hospital there. You're an attorney as well as Speaker of the House. Just your gut reaction to the significance of this, especially in a state that has so many military veterans.
Sure. I don't practice criminal law, so let me start right at the top with that. But I will say anytime a federal grand jury gets impaneled or we learn the federal prosecutors are looking into anything, I think that's an indication of the fact that the issue is being taken seriously. I will say that from the perspective of the House, we, on behalf of our Committee on Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security back in the summer, had sent a letter to the United States Secretary of Veterans Affairs asking that certain questions be answered and that the members be provided with information about what had happened in that facility. We did receive a response back declining that invitation and refusing to provide that information to us at this time while those investigations were ongoing. So it's good to know that that was not just a formality of a response, but that something is actually happening.
I know our congressional delegation unanimously has asked the same things you guys have asked as the House. So
we were in touch with them about our request. We sent copies of the questions that our members composed to our delegation also.
Yeah, and obviously this has been the biggest story in the media in West Virginia last year. We promise our viewers, especially our veterans, will continue to follow the story. Let's talk about some issues going on in the state. Your number one priority is this Mountaineer Impact Fund that you've introduced in the House. What would it do? Is it kind of like a venture capital fund to help bring businesses to West Virginia?
Well, it's less a venture capital fund, Mark, than a vehicle to facilitate the flow of capital from elsewhere around the world into West Virginia and into the Appalachian region in a manner that lets that capital feel safe and complies with certain federal requirements that make those investments either difficult or outright impossible. Now, it's not let's start with what it's not. It's not a vehicle to invest West Virginia state tax dollars. It's not a vehicle for the state to pick economic winners and losers. It's not a vehicle for the state to choose who wins and loses in the economy. It's a way to get significant large-scale investment here in West Virginia using non-tax dollars from all around the world flowing here into West Virginia in a manner that complies with federal law.
As you know, I was a reporter in Silicon Valley in the boom in the late 90s
Absolutely.
and early 2000s. And it wasn't just the neat things they were inventing out there. It was all the money that was coming in to invest in these things. Are we talking about kind of a parallel type of situation where we're trying to bring some capital in here and make things happen that currently aren't happening?
Well, that's right. We talk here in West Virginia in rooms and conversations all across our state about the transformative effect of the petrochemical industry if it were to develop here in the way to use in downstream use of the shale gas resources that we have. But we know that capital here is an obstacle and is a problem to development of almost any large-scale project. There are other parts of the country where that's not the case. Our neighboring states are investing huge amounts of tax dollars, just checks written on behalf of our neighboring states to firms that are looking to site facilities in our bordering states. We don't have a vehicle that lets us participate in that game. We're not in that game right now. This is a way to do it.
We've had a lot to talk about here, but we're down to about 30 seconds. What are your other top legislative priorities as we go forward?
Sure. Well, we're continuing again this year on foster care. We're continuing to work hard on occupational licensing reform and making sure that we've taken down as many barriers as we can to letting West Virginians who want to practice and ply a trade be able to do that. We're continuing to look at things to advance the tech industry. Delegates Fluharty and Capito have launched a new technology caucus this year. I hope you'll get a chance to talk with them at some point about that. That's an important part of our overall economic development strategy. We're excited to see it develop.
Yeah, and it's a bipartisan technology caucus, and a lot of times when that happens, when both sides of the aisle agree, stuff gets done.
That's
Good to see you.
right.
House Speaker Roger Hanshaw.
Thank you, Mark.
Come back before the end of session and update us on things, okay?
Be happy to.
All right. We'll have more of Inside West Virginia Politics, and speaking of Delegate Fluharty, he'll join us next.
Now back to Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
And welcome back to Inside West Virginia Politics. We want to talk about bills, legislation that would legalize or decriminalize the use of marijuana in the Mountain State. Right now I'm joined by Delegate Sean Fluharty. He is a Democrat from Ohio County. He sits on the Judiciary Committee. Good to have you on the show again, my friend.
Thanks for having me, Mark.
We're going to talk about some other things too in a minute, but let's talk about this marijuana legislation, or adult use cannabis, or however it's referred to. What are these bills aimed at doing here, and why?
Aimed at changing our entire economy, changing our state, bringing people here, making West Virginia a destination location and not a departure state, which it has been for many years. And these bills have been introduced previously, and they've been sitting. And as they've been sitting, we've lost nearly 60,000 West Virginians. So I think it's time to have an up and down vote. West Virginians demand it. They deserve it. And this issue is one that is just booming throughout the country. We're talking about over 200,000 jobs, Mark, in this industry. It's the fastest growing industry in the entire country. West Virginia cannot ignore it. And we've been ignoring it. And as you know, in our state's history, we like to be last. And I think it's time we get on the front end on something like this.
The critics would say that, look, this is a state that has a serious opioid epidemic. Why would we want to introduce anything else into the mix? We have enough problems. How do you respond to that?
Well, we have that epidemic, and we have an illegal black market right now. We need to reduce that black market. And the evidence doesn't suggest that legalization, that adult use cannabis would do anything to increase opioid use. In fact, the evidence shows it decreases opioid use. And that's what we need to do. If you look at Colorado, they had a $1 billion black market. Once they went to adult use cannabis, that black market is gone. It evaporated basically overnight. And that's what we want to do, is get rid of the black market, because the black market comes with many drugs and not just cannabis. When you reduce the black market, you succeed. And that's what they're seeing in other states. There's 11 states now. The sun's still rising, and people are making money and doing well, and they're decreasing opioid use.
Let's talk about just some of the practical economic development aspects of it. Do we have the right climate and landscape to do this, to grow product here, or would it have to be imported from other states? Do we have the transportation routes for distribution? I mean, there's a lot of basic economic things that come into this, whether we're talking about, you know, canned green beans or cannabis.
Well, the benefit here is from seed to sale. It would all take place in West Virginia. That's what a lot of people need to realize. The entire economic scale of it would all take place in West Virginia. You can't think of any other market industry where that takes place now. And we would fill our empty warehouses throughout this entire state with workers and hope. And we need to do that now. Now's the time, because we know, Mark, in the next few years the feds may act on this, and it may be legal throughout the entire country. Canada just did it recently. 11 states now. So West Virginia cannot sit back and allow the fastest growing industry to take place elsewhere and not in our own backyard.
Another thing critics say is that, look, this state passed medicinal cannabis 3 years ago. The program is still not off the ground and running. We ought to get that right and fixed and running first before we try any other type of legal product.
And what happened there is we had a few people that really decided to sabotage that program, and that's a shame, because now we are 3 years out and people aren't getting the help they need, and cancer patients aren't getting the help they need, and we have bureaucrats and too many layers with that issue. Had we gone to adult use cannabis to start out, we wouldn't have the bureaucratic layers, and I think we should have done that to start.
Roger Hanson, the Speaker of the House, was just here before you, and he brought up, we want to switch to another topic. It's a nice, smooth transition there. He brought up the high-tech caucus. You're a Democrat. You and Moore Capito are Republican, formed this bipartisan high-tech caucus. What's the importance of that? Because a lot of people see that as the real path through our economy, not cannabis, maybe.
Well, there's many layers to our economy that we need to address, and cannabis is one. But making West Virginia a technological hub is something that I agree with Roger Hanson on, I agree with Moore Capito on, and it's a great bipartisan effort. We had representatives of Apple here recently last week, and we have representatives of other high-tech companies coming in the weeks going forward with the legislative session. And it's interesting, because on the one end, you know, I want to see legislation like cannabis run, and you see both sides fighting with each other. But when you can find things to agree on, that's great, and that's something that we want to make West Virginia a great recruiting ground for tech, and where our people are going to have an advantage over other states in that area, and we're trying to learn how we can help legislatively.
Just quickly, in 30 seconds, you're an attorney in private practice. You work in the Northern Panhandle. We just got word that the grand jury has been seated in the 11 suspicious deaths at the Clarksburg VA. I know you don't have all the details of it, but as a lawyer in West Virginia, what's your reaction to this?
Well, I think it's great news. It shows the investigation is nearing its end, that we're getting evidence, and I think people want to see a resolution here, and those accountable be held accountable, and justice have its day.
All right, we want to thank Delegate Sean Fluharty, Democrat of Ohio County, a member of the Judiciary Committee. As this judiciary. It's tough. It's cold in this room today. It's tough to talk. Anyway, thanks for being here. We'll have more of Inside West Virginia Politics when we come back and I learn how to enunciate a little better.
Now back to Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
And welcome back this weekend to Inside West Virginia Politics. We want to continue our discussion about legalizing or decriminalizing marijuana in the Mountain State. We've heard the pro side. Let's hear a voice against. Joining us right now is Republican State Senator Mike Azinger of Wood County. Good to have you on the program,
Thank you, Mark.
Senator.
Good to be here.
Well, you are not a fan of,
No.
we'll maybe get into medicinal cannabis, which you have concerns about too, but what about the legalization of adult use cannabis for people over the age of 21 in the state? Why are you opposed?
Well, fundamentally, let's start at first principles. Do we, as a state, as the adults in the state, the lawmaking body, do we want to say to the people of West Virginia, especially the young people, the teenagers, do we want to say that making lawful the use of a mind-altering drug is okay? We don't want to do that, in my strong opinion. And where they are doing that, in these states that have legalized, like Colorado, teen marijuana use is going up. These medical marijuana states, teen marijuana use is going up. Pot-induced schizophrenia, up 150%.
I wanted to ask you about that because are you concerned there's a parallel to alcohol, for example? I mean, you and I both went to high school. Kids got
right.
beer and liquor, even though they were 21 years old. I mean, the backers of this say it's 21 and older, but are you worried about the trickle-down effect of people getting it illegally, teenagers?
You're talking about getting
marijuana.
Marijuana. Oh, of course.
Readily as they might get other products that are legal.
Sure. I think everyone understands intuitively that it's a gateway drug. And they'll argue the point, no, it's not. Everybody understands intuitively it's a gateway drug. And you'll hear that testimony from opioid users and from drug users, the folks that are in treatment right now. Many of them started with marijuana. And it's a bad deal.
I think the analogy people use is it's not a cause and effect relationship. Marijuana doesn't cause people to use opioids, but there's a relationship in that some people have used both, and that's the concern.
I think that what it does, and maybe there's some truth to this with alcohol also. I don't know. I think it's apples and oranges when you go with those two, but when you use marijuana, I think it makes it easier to go to the next step. There's not that fear with it and that mystique with it. It breaks down that barrier that is naturally there, that gives us that natural fear of something unknown and potentially dangerous.
One of the things that Governor Justice has told me from time to time, and he supported medicinal marijuana, he signed the bill into law.
Right.
And he supports it being implemented. But when it comes to legal, he said we've had too many problems with opioids in the state. We still haven't solved that and gotten our arms around that to any great degree to stop it. Why should we introduce something else in the mix with marijuana?
I think that's a great point. It's ironic, isn't it, that we have this drug epidemic. Every town has their young people, middle-aged people wandering the sidewalks with their backpacks. Everyone knows who they are. Everyone knows it's a problem. Everyone has a fear of these folks potentially because of what they could be doing and the crime that could be involved there. But
well, let me ask you this. Why do you then, I mean, a lot of people agree with you on that. I get that. But you are an opponent of medicinal marijuana, which had wide bipartisan support. A lot of your fellow Republicans say, what are your concerns?
That's a fair question. I think medicinal marijuana, every state that has become a marijuana legalization state, whatever you call it, has first become a medicinal marijuana state. And I think that's the grand strategy that started way back when, where they changed the whole face of marijuana from the your typical pothead to grandma needing her medicines. If you want to have a CBD oil or some kind of medicinal use from marijuana, Send it through the avenues that you have to, that with every other drug. Send it to the FDA, have them approve it, and then bring it into the market like we do every other drug. But
well, there's talk of that in Washington, and President Trump has hinted sometimes that he might ask the FDA to take it off the Schedule 1 and not make it a narcotic like heroin. Would you favor that?
I think taking it off Schedule 1 is dangerous. I think that it was a Schedule 1 drug for a reason. It has the effects it have are obviously bad for society. Take the use it has medicinally. Create whatever drug you need to create that make sure it's helpful. Send it through the FDA, bring it to the markets like you do anything else.
All right, we've had the pro and con side of legalizing marijuana, both for recreational and medicinal use. We like to have a fair and balanced debate. We'll follow it as it goes through the legislature. We want to thank Senator Mike Azinger, Republican of Wood County, for joining us. We'll have more of Inside West Virginia Politics after this break.
Now back to Inside West Virginia Politics with Mark Curtis.
And welcome back this weekend to our final segment on Inside West Virginia Politics. We're going to shift gears and talk about environmental issues. Joining us now is Democratic Delegate Evan Hanson from Monongalia County. Great to have you on the show.
Thank you for having me.
We've done quite a switch. We've talked about the VA deaths in this show. We've talked about legalizing marijuana. Now we want to talk about clean water. That's a bill you've sponsored. What's going on with the environmental legislation that you and others are backing right now at the Capitol?
Well, there is a Clean Drinking Water Act that's been introduced, and there's also a solar jobs bill that's starting to move today. It's on the Energy Committee agenda this afternoon.
Let's talk about that. How much, you and I were discussing about all the wind turbines out in the Eastern Panhandle. A lot of people don't realize that we have that many wind turbines in the state, but what do you look at in terms of solar and wind energy in terms of being a future in a state that's been so reliant on the coal industry for years?
It's something that we have to do. We have to diversify our energy mix, and one reason for that is that there's a lot of renewable energy jobs that are passing us by. In fact, the fastest growing job sector in the country is solar installers, but we have very few solar jobs in West Virginia because they're going to surrounding states where the policies are more friendly.
Let's talk a little bit more about this, and we should point out you're an environmental and computer engineer, correct?
That's correct.
This is what you do for a living, so you know this stuff. Tracy Dancy visited the Capitol this week to advocate for the clean water legislation and some other things. She's the woman who lost her leg to cancer because she swam in chemically contaminated waters in Clarksburg growing up, or not Clarksburg, Parkersburg growing up. What do you hope to accomplish in that arena? There was a whole environmental day here at the Capitol.
Well, the Clean Drinking Water Act is focusing on those types of chemicals that impacted Tracy. There's a new class of chemicals that were just invented in the last decades, and some of them are proving to be very toxic to people, yet they're not effectively regulated. So that act, first it has us do the science and collect the data so that we know where these chemicals are in West Virginia and how harmful they are. And then once the data and the science is completed, then we can move on to setting standards to make sure that drinking water is safe.
I spoke with Chris Hamilton, who is the head of the Business Industry Council in the state and also vice president of the Coal Association. He maintains the industry and the chemical and coal industries, fossil fuels, are doing enough to protect the environment in the state. He pointed to clean air and clean water standards in the state, and he thinks things are good. Your thoughts on that?
This legislation has nothing to do with the coal industry.
Okay.
It's unrelated.
All right, but in general, I mean, he not only represents the coal industry, but industry in general, which would include the chemical. We're in what they call Chemical Valley here.
Yeah. Well,
do you think the state has been too lax over the years? I guess that's my question here. We're not talking about current legislation. We're talking about past practices.
I'm not sure I would say that the state's been lax. I think that we need to keep up with new data and new science and new chemicals that are invented. So just because we've done something one way 10, 20 years ago doesn't mean that that's appropriate moving forward.
One of the reasons I'm asking you in this way, because this is what you do for a living. I mean, a lot of people have emotional reactions when it comes to environmental issues, but they don't necessarily have the data to back it up. But when I interviewed you this week on the story, you were very adamant as a scientist saying we've got to collect the data, analyze it, and then come to some conclusions and then go forth with whatever legislation we have to do. Talk about that.
Well, I just think that's the best approach. There are people very passionate about the issue on both sides, and I understand why, because we need to protect jobs, but at the same time we also need to protect public health. And the only way to do that in a credible way is to base our decisions on the best data and the best science that we have. So there should be no hesitation from legislators in either party to take that approach.
What else is happening environmental-wise with the legislature? We've talked about the clean drinking water. We've talked about promoting solar energy. What else is on the table out there?
Well, let me just say about that solar legislation, it's a compromise bill. It's not the bill that I had originally introduced, but it's a bill that's being co-sponsored by the Speaker of the House and the Chair and Vice Chair of the Energy Committee, me and others. And what it's going to do is not just allow for large-scale solar development to provide those solar installer jobs, but it'll allow large corporations that are required to get their electricity from renewables to actually come to West Virginia, because they will finally have access to renewable electricity. And that's the real benefit to the state, is attracting businesses to come here and creating those jobs over and above the solar installation jobs. Those are the long-term jobs that are going to help the state.
Yeah. Well, given the turnout for Environmental Day here at the Capitol this week, there were hundreds of people here and a lot of people having the discussion. So we look forward to following your bills and talking more about the environment. We want to thank Delegate Evan Hanson, Democrat of Monongalia County, for being with us this week on Inside West Virginia Politics. Don't forget, we're also a podcast, so download us from your favorite podcast vendor. We'll see you back here next week.